Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this webinar this evening. So we'll be presenting our proposal for the Preston Hill Solar Farm. So my name's Chloe, and I'm the Communications Manager here at Aura Power, and I'm joined by my colleague Chris, who is our UK Development Manager, and Claire, who's our Planning Consultant from Engina. In addition to this webinar, we are also presenting our plans in person at the Peace Memorial Hall in Penkridge tomorrow. That's the 30th of November. Both of these events offer an opportunity to learn more about the proposal and ask any questions. We're also happy to have any other separate discussions, so please do not hesitate to contact us. So just before we go into the proposal itself, I'll just explain to you how this webinar will work. So we'll take about 30 minutes presenting the plans and then open up the virtual floor for any questions you may have for us to answer. So your microphones will be muted for all of the session, but you should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It looks a little bit like a speech bubble. And then you should be able to type your question for then us to see and answer out loud. We'll only be answering questions at the end of the presentation once we've presented our plans, so please feel free to type your questions at any time during this session. However, I'd advise waiting till the end just in case that your question is covered in our presentation. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available to watch again on our website. If you are watching the recorded version and have a question that has not been addressed, please do contact us. We'll also make the presentation slides available to download from the website. The purpose of this webinar is to present our initial plans and understand local views, concerns and suggestions, and then incorporate the feedback into our final layout, which we'll then submit to South Staffordshire Council in the new year. We would therefore like to ask you to complete a short survey form after the webinar, which will be sent round following this session. It'll also be available on the project webpage. So, excuse me, who is Aura Power? So we are a renewable energy developer and we're based in Bristol, and we were founded in 2013. We have around 40 staff in total and a dedicated UK team. We're developing numerous utility-scale solar farms and battery storage sites, not only in the UK, but also in the Republic of Ireland, Portugal, Italy, Spain, Canada, and the US. Our portfolio to date has seen over 600 megawatts of projects built or in construction, and have had 3 solar farms approved planning permission in other parts of the country this year. We're a joint venture partner of IB Vogt. They are a German engineering firm that's built over 1 gigawatt of solar farms worldwide and develops projects on a global scale. This equates to over 3 million solar panels with over 80 solar farms of varying sizes, of which more of half of those are situated in the UK. We are developing projects from the initial inception all the way through to construction and operation, and we work with specialist contractors and consultants along the way. So we follow 3 key mission goals when we develop our projects and work closely with landowners and local stakeholders to develop our sites to the highest standards. These are tackling the climate crisis. We're in a global energy transition to clean renewable energy sources and in the fight to prevent the worst impacts of climate change. Enhancing the natural environment. Our sites include measures to enhance the natural environment and bolster biodiversity. And then thirdly, engaging with local communities. It is a priority of ours to work closely with the local stakeholders like yourselves to understand concerns and build trust with the communities that host our projects. So why do we need solar farms? So as we all know, we are in a climate and ecological emergency, and it's important to recognise why solar can play such an important role in the future of the energy sector and our environment. The UK has a legally binding target to reach net zero emissions by 2050, as well as completely decarbonising the UK's power supplies by 2035. COP27 held this year in Egypt recently highlighted that we are on a highway to climate hell, underlining the importance of governments around the globe to take urgent action to tackle climate change. Solar farms provide a much needed source of homegrown renewable energy whilst boosting local biodiversity with a number of ecological enhancements included as part of the design. Food production is able to continue with sheep grazing amongst the panels, and the soil is allowed to rejuvenate, providing a stable carbon store and often leaving the soil in a better condition than it was before. So in the transition to net zero, electricity produced from solar farms is currently 9 times cheaper than that produced from gas and can thus help to collectively bring down power prices for everyone. Less reliance on energy from overseas allows the UK to become more self-sufficient and strengthen energy security. Electricity demand is due to increase threefold due to the move away from fossil fuel-based heating and transport. And the UK government's energy security strategy, released earlier this year, sets out a 5-fold increase in solar deployment by 2035. So this solar farm that we are proposing will have a capacity of 49.9 megawatts, which is equivalent to the power of 20,300 electric cars, generating enough electricity to power the equivalent of approximately 14,000 homes. It will save around 12,400 tons of CO2 from entering the atmosphere each year, compared to electricity produced from gas, or put differently, equivalent to saving 13 million pounds of burned coal each year. There have been a number of misconceptions about solar farms over the past year, particularly regarding food security. Solar farms do not pose a risk of food security when in compliance with national planning policy, and in fact support farmers financially to allow them to continue farming on other parts of their land. Even if the 5-fold increase in solar set out by the government was built, they would still only occupy 0.3% of all land in the UK, which is actually much less than current golf courses. Sorry, I keep skipping through the slides. So, site location. So as you can see from the map here, our proposed site is located about 1 kilometre from Penkridge on land between Leavedale Road and Preston Vale Lane. Despite what you might think, solar irradiance levels are very good in this part of the UK, and this solar farm will be able to produce 58,653 megawatt hours of energy every year. The total site area covers approximately 61 hectares of land, with a significant amount also used for biodiversity enhancements and screening, which we'll talk about a bit later on. The land is owned by 2 landowners with a mix of arable and grazing, both looking to diversify their land use as farming in the UK is becoming increasingly challenging through more unpredictable weather and market conditions. We do recognise that there are a few properties close to our proposed boundary, particularly on Preston Vale Lane, and have included setbacks and tree planting in these locations. We will talk about this a bit later on, but are certainly open to further discussions with these residents to see if there's any more that we could be doing. While some of the land is currently used for growing crops, it is mostly grade 3B land, which is not best most versatile. During the lifetime of the solar farm, the land can continue to be used for food production with sheep grazing, as some of it already is. Furthermore, as the fields will be left fallow, the soil will benefit from being rested and improve its natural long-term fertility. Finding a site for a solar farm can be very difficult, as there are many constraints that need to be sensibly considered and balanced. Indeed, locating sufficient capacity on the electricity network is one of the most difficult challenges. As the electricity grid becomes increasingly saturated with renewables energy generation and the distribution network playing catch-up, securing a grid connection, as we have done here with National Grid, which was formerly Western Power, is becoming increasingly challenging. The land is relatively well hidden, assisted by existing vegetation and topography with limited nearby visual receptors. The site also benefits from having the potential to accommodate additional screening and mitigation measures, such as additional tree belts and hedgerows, which will also add to biodiversity net gain. As well as the secured grid connection, we believe the land is also suitable as there are no landscape, heritage or ecological designations in or close proximity to the site. Developing solar on farmland not only offers enough space to generate electricity, but it also allows us to boost biodiversity levels and actually improve habitats for wildlife. I'll now pass on to Chris.
Thank you, Chloe. Okay, so what makes up a solar farm? Something that many of you probably will have some idea. The main component is, of course, the photovoltaic panels. These will be set out in rows with enough space between and underneath them for sheep to graze. Solar technology is advancing rapidly, and we will be using south-facing fixed tilt bifacial panels, which allow for higher efficiency in converting sunlight to solar energy. The panels will have a lower edge of a minimum of 0.8 meters high and a maximum height of 3 meters, though it is likely this will be lower when it actually comes to construction. Between each row, there will be a minimum gap of 2.1 meters. This will enable the land to be grazed underneath throughout the lifetime of the project. There'll also be a substation, and this is where we connect into the grid network that feeds into the overhead line. The compound will contain a number of electrical infrastructure components and will be surrounded by a security fence. Inverters are another key component. They'll be located underneath the panels, as we'll be using string inverters, and will convert power from direct current to alternating current in order to be safely absorbed by the distribution network operator. Transformers will also be placed in a couple of locations around the site. They'll be used to step the voltage up so that it can be distributed into the grid network. This allows for a more efficient transfer of energy across the grid network. There'll also be storage units. These contain spare parts and will be generally located in the vicinity of the substation. And of course, there'll be fencing. This will be installed for security purposes, and it'll be around about 2 meters high around the perimeter of the site. This will be in the style of a rural deer fence with wooden posts, and will have enough space for small mammals to pass through. Access tracks will be laid out in a couple of locations across the site. Some new site access tracks will be built, though we will be using existing access tracks and hedgerow gaps where possible. New access tracks would have the appearance of a typical vernacular farm track with a crushed stone surface and will be around 4 meters in width. The tracks are permeable and would be allowed to grass over in time. There'll also be a temporary construction compound. This would be an area within the site for construction deliveries and site and welfare facilities. This will prevent vehicles from congesting the road. All cables that connect the panels to the transformers and then onto the substation will be underground and within the site. And finally, there is no security lighting when the solar farm is operational. The only lighting that may be in place will be during construction. However, as construction will mainly take place during daylight hours and is likely to be in the summer months, lighting requirements will be minimal. So I think next slide, please, Clay. Thank you. So this leads me on to the design. So panel arrays will only disturb a very small proportion of the ground, typically less than 1%, as it is only the posts which are pile driven into the ground for the panels to sit on top of, leaving grass to grow normally underneath. This allows plenty of space for sheep to graze. The grass can still grow under the panels on a UK solar farm, despite the misconception that shade prevents it from doing so. And indeed, the panels can afford the sheep some protection from bad weather and shade in sunny weather. And indeed, there are many solar farms within the UK that have lots of happy sheep underneath, and many of which you can see out and about. So we'll be using monocrystalline silicon-based solar panels, which have up to 96% recycling efficiency. The substation is located in the north of the site, as you can see from the grey box. This is where we connect the electricity into the grid to supply clean energy to your homes. Operational period of this solar farm would be would be 35 years. Once the end of the operational period is reached, the solar farm will be decommissioned and the land returned back to its former state. We believe it is likely to be in a better state than it was before the solar farm was built, with more trees, more hedges, and more wildlife. There will also have been far fewer pesticides and fertilizers sprayed on the land in this time. In addition to the solar panels and associated infrastructure, the proposal will include a number of ecological and landscape enhancements, such as new hedgerows and tree planting, species-rich grassland and wildflower meadows. All existing hedgerows and trees in and around the site will be retained, other than, I think, only in one case where required for access. Existing hedgerows will be allowed to grow up to 3 meters high, as well as planting new trees for screening purposes. We're proposing to plant approximately 1 kilometre of 5 metre wide tree belts in a number of locations to screen the solar farm from view from the nearest properties. These are located in the southeast and southwest of the site and along the north and northeastern boundary. The improved grassland beneath and around the panels allows us gains in biodiversity. Wildflowers will be sown in various parts of the site to further boost biodiversity and attract much needed pollinators to help tackle the ecological crisis. Buffers and setbacks are included to protect existing on-site ecological and archaeological features. We are also proposing a number of bird, bat, owl and dormice boxes to encourage nesting, as well as log piles, compost and bug hotels for snakes and invertebrates. In addition to the on-site enhancements, we are also proposing an off-site area to mitigate the loss of nesting habitat for skylark, which will include skylark plots or land managed for ground nesting birds. Worth mentioning is, as you might already be aware, that there are no effective footpaths by this development, or indeed bridleways. It should also be noted that as solar farms are very quiet, we do not predict any adverse noise effects on homes nearby, or indeed any noise effects on homes nearby. And finally, just worth mentioning that we welcome any suggestions from members of the public or local conservation groups on how we can maximise our biodiversity efforts and encourage local people to get involved in the monitoring of biodiversity, particularly much needed bee populations. I think that leads me to the next slide, please, Chloe. Thank you. So these next few slides show the site from a number of nearby viewpoints. We have agreed 14 viewpoint locations with South Staffordshire Council's landscape officer to show the visibility of the solar farm from various locations in the nearby area. The green dots on the map show the visualizations we will be presenting in this consultation and represent the most impacted views. The pink dots are the locations of the other viewpoints which will be submitted with the planning application in due course. As this webinar is intended to gain feedback on our initial proposal, we have not yet finalised the design, so please note that the next images you see are worst case scenarios. We have also included interpretations of the projected views after 10 years, once the trees and hedges have grown. There will be more visualizations available to view once we have submitted our application, but these are to give an initial impression of the scheme. So let's have a look at those visualizations. Thank you. Okay, so this viewpoint is taken from Preston Vale Lane along the south of the site. This viewpoint is probably the worst from all areas around the site, but as you can see, once the hedgerow has grown up, it will screen the solar panels and fence from view. Moving on to the next set of images. Thank you. So this viewpoint image is taken from Leavedale Road. It is around 235 meters to the nearest panel, which you can see very faintly in the middle image. We are proposing a new tree belt in front of these panels, which you can see in the bottom image, and hide the solar farm from view entirely. It should be noted that these 10-year interpretations are designed only to show the solar farm and the growth of the tree planting we're proposing, not the growth of existing vegetation beyond our site boundary. So moving on to the next viewpoint, please. Thank you. So this viewpoint is taken to the south of the site on Congreve Bridleway, 864 meters away. You can see the grey shading of the panels in the bottom photo, and due to the topography of the field, the solar farm will be visible from this location. I'll hand over to our planning consultant, Claire, at this point.
Thanks, Chris. Next slide, please, Chloe. I'll be talking about the construction and access, and then moving on to biodiversity and other studies that we've started to do. So the construction of the solar farm will take place over a 4 to 6 month period, likely during the spring and summer months. If planning permission is granted in 2023, we would aim to start construction in 2024, but we will notify the local community well in advance of that. The route shown here is an indicative route from the M6 via the A449 Stafford Road, turning onto Leavedale Road. We're using an existing entry point into the land and avoiding the removal of existing hedgerows and trees. HGV movements will only happen outside of peak times, and a contact number will be made available for any residents who have any concerns over this construction period. Residents along the route in the vicinity of the solar farm would also be notified in advance of construction. Where possible, we would use the existing field access tracks to reach areas of panels further within the solar farm site. And as Chris mentioned, compacted stone will be used where existing access tracks are not adequate for HGVs and those tracks need to be upgraded. The traffic management plan will be implemented before construction and agreed with the Council's Highways Authority. Most construction traffic will arrive on site in the first few weeks of construction, after which the number of HGVs will reduce significantly. The solar farm requires little maintenance, so after construction there will be minimal traffic going to site. Next slide, please, Chloe. As both Chloe and Chris have mentioned, there will be biodiversity enhancements with the proposal. This is because we are facing an ecological emergency as well as a climate emergency. A recent study by scientists at London's Natural History Museum has shown the UK has lost nearly half of its biodiversity since the Industrial Revolution. That's more biodiversity loss than any G7 country and is the worst 10% globally. Sorry, in the worst 10% globally. We have also lost a staggering 97% of wildflower meadows since the 1930s. Political leaders are starting to take action and have committed to reversing biodiversity loss by 2030. Solar farms can significantly improve local biodiversity by providing new habitats and food for wildlife. A recent study by the Solar Trade Association discovered that some solar farms had up to 6 times more pollinators than adjacent fields without solar panels on. Panels sit on piles, so there is minimal disturbance to the ground, which allows the grass to continue to grow and the ability for sheep to graze beneath them, as Chris has mentioned. It also means that the solar panels are easy to remove at the end of their life with minimal disturbance to the environment. Arable fields can be converted to species-rich pasture and so acting as a stable store of carbon, a dual benefit to combat climate change and boost biodiversity. As the fields are left fallow for the life of the solar farm, the soil will be kept healthy, boost carbon sequestration, and after the solar farm has reached the end of its life, it can be removed with up to 96% of the equipment recyclable. The land will then be returned to its previous state, or even better than before. We are proposing to plant 1 kilometre of broadleafed trees and 500 metres of hedgerows, as well as planting species-rich grassland and wildflowers. Dormouse, bird, bat and owl boxes are also proposed in the site design to encourage nesting. This will greatly benefit local wildlife, and we predict an increase of 70+% in biodiversity across the site. A full biodiversity net gain calculation will be submitted with the planning application once our ecologists have finalised their assessment and on the final layout. Next slide, please, Chloe. We will be also producing a landscape and ecological management plan. A draft is underway. This will ensure that the biodiversity gains are maximised throughout the lifetime of the solar farm. The LEMP will specify things such as where and how existing vegetation will be enhanced, the density of new meadow, hedges and trees, the species mix for the various habitats, although they will be local native species, also how habitats will be protected during construction and how habitats will be maintained through the project. The plan will be agreed with South Staffordshire Council and will outline the management regime of the solar farm for its entire life. Progression of the habitats will be monitored annually and reports will be submitted to the Council, which will be publicly available. The LEMP will be regularly reviewed and adapted if necessary to ensure the biodiversity aims are met. We also welcome local conservation charities and groups who may be interested in our site to get in touch with regards to monitoring of wildlife populations. Next slide, please, Chloe. A screening exercise has been conducted with South Staffordshire Council, who have confirmed that an environmental impact assessment is not required in support of the future planning application. Notwithstanding this, we have undertaken extensive environmental surveys to inform the site design and also accompany the planning application. These include ecology, so an extended phase 1 habitat survey has been undertaken. There are no ecological designations on site, and those in the wider area have been considered in determining the appropriate scope of surveys. We've undertaken a number of ecological surveys over the past year, including for habitats, birds, bats, and great-crested newts. Buffers from existing ecological features, including trees and hedgerows and ponds, are also included to protect those habitats. In terms of landscape, the assessment has informed the height of the solar panels, which has been limited to 3 metres to minimise visual impact in the surrounding area. Site visits have been undertaken to identify the representative viewpoints, as Chris has taken you through. The landscape assessment will include assessment of impacts on landscape character and visual impact for residents, road and rail users, and users of public rights-of-way in the wider area. A landscaping plan is proposed to minimise visibility of the site and will also enhance biodiversity. A noise assessment has been carried out in accordance with industry standards, but solar farms are very quiet and do not make noise at all during the night, for obvious reasons. The noise assessment concluded that residential amenity is not expected to be negatively impacted, and therefore there are no noise-related issues that would prevent the site progressing. For flood risk, the vast majority of the site is in flood zone 1, meaning that there's a very low risk of flooding from rivers or the sea. A very tiny proportion on the southern boundary is in flood zone 2. No high voltage equipment will be located where there may be the possibility of surface water flooding, and solar farms do not contribute to flooding, as the arrays are designed with gaps to allow surface water to be evenly dispersed and absorbed by the healthy grass sward underneath. Solar farms can also include mitigation measures to help alleviate existing flooding. If this is a problem in your area and local people are currently facing these issues, please let us know and we can factor it into the design. So a desk-based assessment has been undertaken with regard to heritage, including a site visit, and it considers the potential impacts of the development on designated and non-designated heritage assets. We have also undertaken a geophysical assessment, which has uncovered some areas of archaeological interest. Our design has accounted for these findings, and there are no physical impacts on any designated heritage assets. Further consultation will take place with the county archaeologist as the project progresses as well. Finally, with glint and glare, solar panels are designed to absorb light rather than to reflect it. They are considered safe to install close to airports and near major roads. The reflection from a solar farm is much less than commercial greenhouses, polytunnels and even grass. From a distance, they appear in the landscape similar to a ploughed field or small lake. An assessment of potential impacts upon road, rail, residential and aviation receptors will, however, be undertaken upon the final site layout design. Any potential impacts will be mitigated either through panel removal or tree and hedgerow planting. In terms of agricultural land, this has already been touched upon, but the majority is grade 3B, which is not the best and most versatile. I'll hand back now to Chloe, I believe.
Great, thank you, Claire and Chris. So local benefits. So as well as the enriched biodiversity that we've mentioned, there are also a number of local benefits which this solar farm could bring. The solar farm would contribute to the local economy through the creation of jobs and using local contractors where possible. We also feel it's important to contribute directly to the local community via a community fund. So the community fund is £20,000 a year for the lifetime of the solar farm. So for 35 years would total £700,000. This is encouraged to be spent locally on social and environmental projects. Typical projects that have been funded by other solar farm projects include energy efficiency measures on public buildings, play equipment for children, and at one solar farm in a remote rural area, it even funded fibre optic broadband. The administration of these funds will be managed locally, typically by the parish council or an independent trust, and we welcome further discussions with the parish council and local residents on this. If you have any suggestions for how the fund could be spent, or are a local supplier who would like to be considered in our tendering process, please do let us know. We also want to help infuse the younger generation and educate them on the importance of renewable energy. As such, we would like to encourage school visits to the proposed solar farm and educational sessions to local schools about the importance of renewable energy. We use an experienced specialist who tailor their sessions to the national curriculum. If you are or know of a teacher from a local school who is interested in participating, then we would love to hear from you. The solar farm would also contribute over £100,000 in business rates to South Staffordshire Council each year. So, timeframes. Consulting with the local community is very important to us, and also a crucial part of getting our final design right to submit a planning application. Following this consultation, we will look to incorporate the views of the local community and interested parties into our proposal and revise our designs if necessary and feasible. We will then finalise our proposed design and aim to submit our planning application in the next few months. South Staffordshire Council has already provided pre-application advice, and we will continue to work with the planning officer and specialist consultees once submitted to address any comments raised. After the application is submitted, the council will undertake its own consultation process and invite local residents to comment on the application. Our aim is to submit a proposal which not only complies fully with the local plan and the national planning policy framework, but one which the local community can support. The planning determination period for developments of this scale can take anything from 13 weeks to 32 weeks, but we hope to have a decision in the summer of next year. If approved, we would look to start construction at the earliest in the spring/summer of 2024. If you would like to speak to us in person, we will be holding an in-person exhibition at the Peace Memorial Hall in Penkridge tomorrow from 4 till 7 p.m. And if this isn't convenient and you'd still like to speak to us separately, please do not hesitate to get in touch. So, thank you all for listening to our proposal. We'll now answer any questions that you have. So if you haven't already done so, please do use that question and answer button. It looks like a little speech button at the bottom of your screen. If you click on it, it should open up a text box that you can then write a question. Once I see those questions come in, Claire, myself, or Chris will answer that question and we'll answer them out loud. So if you haven't, then please ask a question. I can't see that there are any in there at the moment. Oh, I think there are two popped in. Yeah, okay, brilliant. So first question, what size height is the substation? Does this mean the installation of overhead power lines? So I'll answer this in part, and then perhaps Chris, if you can fill in the gaps, that'd be great. So we are connecting into the overhead line, which is already on the site. So as Chris mentioned earlier, one of the reasons that we've located this site is because of the grid capacity that's already in situ. So the substation will be built from our side and from the local distribution network side within the site. And that will go directly into the power line. It's made from a number of different metal electrical infrastructure components, as well as like shipping containers for control rooms, etc. Chris, do you want to fill in on any more on that?
Yeah, sure. Echo that. The main bulk of what a substation looks like on the ground is electrical components. So there's switchgear, there's a transformer, there's circuit breakers, control rooms. So there's a variety of electrical equipment, all of which have sort of different dimensions. But I would say if you took an average, you'd be looking at about a 2 to 3, possibly in some cases a 4 meter high in general. So I hope that provides you with a degree of what we would be proposing. Worth mentioning that we will be, as you maybe are aware already, putting in elevation plans for all equipment that we'll be proposing, and the substation is something that you'll be able to see there.
Thanks, Chris. Also to note on the substation, so the design will be uploaded to our website and we'll be presenting it tomorrow if you do head down to the Paintbridge Hall, but it's set back quite from Leavedale Road within the site. So there is a development before it, and we're also planting a number of trees and hedgerows, so it shouldn't be visible from the road. Okay, I will move on to the next question. So you state in your literature that this project will enhance biodiversity. Can you explain how exactly and what evidence do you have to support this statement? Yeah, I'll pass over to Claire. Claire, would you mind answering that question?
Yeah, of course. So there's many enhancements to go with the application in terms of biodiversity and ecology, and these have actually been worked up by the ecologist that has undertaken the site assessment. So they're very aware of the local area and local species. So it's all been bespoke to the site. There will be an area of mitigation to the south of the main solar farm area, which will be assigned as habitat for skylark. That's been the main species that's been sort of identified as requiring mitigation on this site. In addition, obviously, there's a significant amount of grassland improvement. So from the current sort of cattle grazing and sheep grazing grassland, it will be improved to biodiversity wildflower and grass meadow. The Solar Trade Association and I forget the name of the group, but there is a published study which shows the benefits of biodiversity at solar farms, which again I can bring along to the exhibition tomorrow, or provide via email if anyone would like to drop contact details over. But yeah, with the site being almost left from intensive agricultural production, that improves the chances for a wide variety of species to colonise on the site.
Thank you, Claire. Cool. I'll move on to the next question. So the next question is regarding the access route. So Leavedale Road is being proposed as the access route. Yep, that is correct. This person states that it's already in a bad condition with many potholes and ruts due to the impact of surface water, farm machinery and lorries from wells, farm dairy. How many vehicles do you expect will use the road each day during the construction period? And can anything be done to improve the condition of the road? Claire, do you mind taking the answer on kind of construction vehicle levels? And I'm happy to fill in after.
Of course, yeah. So we're still undertaking the assessment on the exact sort of numbers of vehicles that will be accessing the site, but as a general rule for a project of this size, we'd be looking in the region of around 35 movements per day. So a movement is a to and a from site. So obviously you don't have half a lorry, so around 18 lorries per day. These will all be timed outside of peak periods to avoid sort of congestion on the highway, and also there will be limits set within a construction traffic management plan to avoid any stacking on the highway and to minimise potential impacts as far as possible. There will be measures as well, such as advanced signage and notifications to sort of ease that period. Obviously, there will be disruption to the very local residents at that time, which we will try to avoid as much as possible. And any suggestions of measures that can be taken, we would happily listen to. In terms of the road condition, typically a pre-construction survey would be undertaken on the highway, and all construction traffic would then be stipulated to use a particular access route, so that only that section of highway is used. And then following construction, the road would be returned to its current or better state. So there would be no worsening of the state of that road as a result of the solar farm. Because the road is obviously in highway control, there is, it's not straightforward to be able to say we can improve the condition of that whole stretch of road, but there are definitely things that can be done in discussion with the highway authority to ensure that that is made no worse.
Thanks, Claire. Another question here. So are you aware of the other solar farm planning applications locally? There is another application near Dunstan Heath, about 1.5 miles away towards Stafford. Yes, we are aware that there's another application very close by. I think they're also in a similar stage of development to this project, maybe slightly further ahead, but we do consider those in our plans as part of the assessment, particularly the landscape assessment. They will be included in our cumulative assessment, which will then be submitted to the council, and then that will be assessed by the landscape officer at the council and the planning officer as well. So yes, we are aware, and yes, they will be accounted for. Next question. So would local residents get any direct benefits from having this on our doorstep apart from those already detailed? Direct benefits, it depends exactly what you're referring to. The community fund has been set up to provide a direct benefit in the community. Exactly how that fund has been is managed or used for is certainly something that we're open to discuss collectively. So if you want to contact us separately, then please drop me an email or a call, and we can have a discussion on what those what that community fund support could look like. Next question. Would there be any increase in fire risk due to this type of development? Chris, would you like to take this question?
Yep, sure, thank you. So the simple answer is no, there won't be any increase in fire risk. Everything that we do is not only insured, but it's also completely compliant with British standards. Yeah, there's no chance that there'll be anything that is remotely flammable or badly maintained. Yeah, this will be a very expensive bit of kit that hopefully we'll be installing, and we'll be making sure that we look after it and maintain it as appropriate. So yeah, no further risk of fire, certainly not.
Great, thank you, Chris. We've got another question here. I'll just read it out loud. So you stated that you will achieve 70% biodiversity net gain. A couple of questions associated with this. So number one, are the public able to see the biodiversity net gain calculations to see how you would achieve this? Yes, most definitely. So that calculation will be submitted with the planning application. It's called a biodiversity net gain calculation in the assessment title, so you should be able to find it quite easily. And if you can't, then please get in touch and I'd be happy to point you in that direction. Will all the existing ponds be retained? Yes, they will. And there will also be some enhancements to, I think, a few of the ponds, which include some additional management and also some wildflower planting, etc., around those ponds and in other areas. Next question, will the stocking density of the sheep be up to the landowner or agreed with Aura Power, as this could impact the environmental value of the grassland habitats proposed? I'll let Chris take that one. That's all right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so a simple answer is it will be decided by the council and then agreed with the landowner. So yeah, we'll work with both the council and the landowners to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet about stocking density, because yeah, it's very important that we get that right, so that the grass mix that we put on the ground is allowed to flourish in the way that it should.
Just to add on to biodiversity there and the pond question, there's also a separation from those ponds that will be maintained during the life of the project, and stock-proof fencing will be around the ponds to obviously work both ways in terms of sheep management to stop them getting into the ponds, and also to protect the biodiversity that's within the ponds as well.
I think as well, certainly in one case, we're also, we hope to be installing hedgerows, which will connect, I think, 3 ponds together. So that should mean that there'll be a wildlife corridor, which isn't there at the moment. So that should really help out. wildlife in that sense.
Okay, it looks like that was all of the questions that came in. So thank you very much to everybody for listening and to answering those questions. And thanks very much for your time this evening. 10 minutes to go before the football, so if anybody's watching that, you can scoot off. But if, yeah, we would be grateful if you could complete our short survey. This will be uploaded to the project website and will also be circulated to all of those attendees this evening. And if you have anything you would like to discuss further with us, then please do get in touch. You can contact myself. My details are on the screen here. They're also on our project webpage. And also, obviously, we'll be exhibiting at the Penkridge Memorial Hall tomorrow. That's Wednesday, the 30th of November from 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. We'll be presenting the same information as we have done, but we'll be available to speak to in person, and the plans will be on a AO board, so they'll be a bit more visible. So if you are watching the recorded version of this, then you can find the feedback questionnaire, like I said, on the webpage. Your personal details will not be passed on to any third parties and will only be used for the purpose of this public consultation. So thanks again, everybody, and hope you have a lovely evening and good night.